Now, with just a day to go for the public schools matrics results, a row has broken out over the adjustments of the marks. Umalusi, the education watchdog, has announced that out of the 58 matric subjects, 28 will be upwardly adjusted. The decision has not gone down well in several quarters, with critics questioning the methodology and the impact. Upward adjustments are done when exam papers are more difficult than previous years, but critics such as the Democratic Alliance allege a lack of evidence to demonstrate that the papers were of a higher standard. If actual marks are worse than last year's, the department adjusts them upwards. Now, the counter is that the difficulty should be assessed independently of the results and prior to exams and not later. Umalusi says standardization ensures that learners are not disadvantaged. But the Democratic Alliance says underperforming learners are at a disadvantage in the later stages. Now, while Umalusi defends the process, saying it mitigates the impact on learners' performance by factors other than their own knowledge, critics say adjusting marks upwards may mask systematic problems that mar the education system. Gavin Davis, Democratic Alliance Shadow Minister of Communications, joins us on the phone line now to weigh in on this matter. Mr. Davis, thank you so much for joining us. What is your stance regarding the policy of upward adjustments of the matrics marks?
Well, we've got nothing against upward adjustments if it can be shown that those adjustments are justified. As Umalusi has said, the only legitimate justification for adjusting the marks upwards is if the papers were more difficult than the previous year. Fortunately, we've had no evidence, even though we have called for the evidence, that the papers were more difficult than last year. In fact, it seems to us that the reason why the marks dropped and needed to be readjusted upwards was because of the huge influx of progressed learners. So we had 109,000 progressed learners in this cohort, which we believe had to be compensated for, and which we believe because of that, it might have led to an upward adjustment in the marks that might artificially inflate the marks. Now, I've put these questions to Umalusi, and I've put them in an open letter because they wouldn't reply to my private correspondence. And for some very strange reason, Umalusi is declining to respond to my very open, honest, and constructive questions. So it is very strange indeed that these questions continue to go unanswered on the eve of the announcement of the matric results.
Now, Mr. Davis, after your assessment of the questions that you have posed, what amendments would you like to suggest to improve or even change the process?
You know, I think what is required is absolute transparency about the standardization process and the justification for either adjusting the marks upwards or downwards in each case, because I think this matter is hugely in the public interest, and the public have a right to know exactly how the standardization process is working and what the reasons were for the decisions taken in each case. So going forward, I think what would help everybody is if Umalusi just committed to absolute transparency so that everybody could see exactly what was going on. But at the moment, there seems to be a veil of secrecy over the standardization process, and we are trying to pierce that veil so that everybody can see how the marks were adjusted.
Now, the Gauteng MEC says that your criticism is a political point scoring. What is your reaction to that allegation?
Well, I don't really understand how it's political point scoring. He seems to think that I already know the matric results, which of course I don't. We only find out tomorrow night. So I don't know what the results were in Gauteng. I don't know what the results were in the Western Cape, and I don't know what the national results were. So I have no other motive for questioning this methodology than to ensure that there's transparency and to ensure that the public interest is served. So with respect to Mr. Lesufi, I think he's engaging in political point scoring by making the accusations that he's making.
And lastly, Mr. Davis, do you think this compromises perhaps the quality of education standards instead of actually helping the learners? And what flaws do you think are in the SAS education system that could be leading to these falling scores?
You know, I don't want to jump to conclusions and say that the standards have dropped. I'm simply asking for answers to a set of questions. If those questions can't be answered, it might point to a drop in the standards. And if that is the case, it means that you're going to have a whole cohort of learners who will be looking for work next year or trying to get into university, and they would be ill-equipped for the world of work and for university if their marks have been inflated. And that is what we're worried about. We're worried about that, and we're worried about a lack of equity across the years, because a matric in 2016 must mean the same as a matric in 2015, and it must mean the same as a matric in 2014. There has to be standards across the years that are equitable, otherwise some learners will be discriminated against, and that's what we're concerned about.